welcome back to my kitchen. Hey you guys, I would like to share another one of Amber May's amazing canning recipes with you today. Amber May is the founder of the Snug group on Facebook. That's SNUG, Canning to Preserve Our Future, on Facebook. She has shared well over 1,000 wonderful canning recipes with her membership, and she and I and the rest of the admin team would love to invite you to our group. You'll find amazing recipes, great advice, and guidance for whatever you need in your canning journey. The recipe that I'd like to share with you today is Amber May's recipe for canned beef stroganoff. Now this is a beef stroganoff base. There is no dairy in it. You add the sour cream when you open to heat and serve this beef stroganoff base. So this is a wonderful, wonderful canning recipe. And her recipe, I'm kind of working here while I'm talking. Her recipe, a single recipe, which I will read to you, will give you about 6 pints of beef stroganoff or 3 quarts. Now, I will read the original recipe to you. I myself, I'm tripling and maybe even a little bit more of that recipe tonight because I had some beef that needed to be used up and I had a ton of mushrooms that need to be used up. And so this was just the perfect opportunity for me to walk you through this wonderful recipe of Amber May's. So I will just quickly read the original recipe as it's written. This is a single recipe. Please keep that in mind. 6 pints or 3 quarts is what it will net you. Her recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of pepper, 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of dried thyme, 2 teaspoons of dried parsley, 4 tablespoons of tomato paste, 4 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, 2 cloves of garlic minced, 1 cup of mushrooms sliced, 1 onion chopped, and 2 pounds of stewing beef. And then you will need some beef broth also. And for a single recipe, you'll probably need about 1 quart or 1.5 quarts of beef broth. Now, what I like to do is I personally like to sear my beef. Now, my beef I have cut into approximately 1-inch cubes, okay? And just as a little handy tip, beef is a whole lot easier to cut if it's partially frozen, all right? Not frozen solid, but partially frozen. And you will find out that it is so much easier to cut or cube or whatever you're doing with it if it's a little bit frozen. Now what I like to do, like I said, is I like to sear my meat just a little bit. And so all I've done is in my big stock pot, because now keep in mind, I'm tripling my recipe. I'm going to have a really, really large recipe. You might not need this big of a pot. But I like to sear my beef just a little bit, and then I just kind of set it aside. And so I have seared some of my meat already, and I'm just going to fish that out of my pot, and I'm just going to set that aside in another dish and continue searing the rest of my beef until I've got it all done. And I pretty much, you guys, I do this all in one pot, okay? There's no reason to have a million different dishes getting dirty if you can avoid it. And this is one of those projects where you can avoid getting multiple things dirty and having to wash it up later. So there is my first little batch of beef, and I'm just going to add some more to my pot and get that seared up. And I'm just going to keep doing little batches of this until I've got it all completed. And at that point in time, then I'll come back and continue with you. See you in a few minutes. All right, guys, so all of my beef has been seared, okay? Now, this is not completely cooked. It's just partially cooked. And what that does by searing that meat is sometimes it helps the meat to hold together in better chunks instead of just kind of falling apart so easily. So my pan is still hot and going. There's a lot of that good beef juice in there. And what I like to do next is I like to just saute my onion for a little while in there. And of course, you know, if you're only making one recipe, you're only going to have one onion. But I have 3 onions tonight. And I just like to cook those for just a little while until they get a little bit translucent and softened up. So we're just going to let those cook for maybe 5 minutes or so, and then I'll be back. Alrighty, so I have allowed my onions to kind of saute for a little while and soften, and they're looking pretty translucent at this point in time. So this is the time that I like to add all of my spices. You know, that would be your parsley and thyme, salt, pepper, garlic, and also your Worcestershire sauce. And if you're going to put tomatoes in, I forgot to tell you that, I'm going to omit the tomatoes tonight, the tomato paste. I just don't have any on hand, and actually my idea of beef stroganoff, I've never had tomatoes in it anyway, so I'm just going for a more basic flavor. But you would also add your tomato paste at this time also. So just go ahead and just get all of your herbs into your sauteed onions. And add your Worcestershire sauce. And now what we're going to do is give that a little bit of a stir, just to get that good and incorporated. Oh, you guys, that smells so good. And now I add all of my mushrooms. And like I said, you guys, I had a lot of mushrooms that I needed to get out of the refrigerator and into use and canned up so that they wouldn't go bad. And you can use the button mushrooms, or you can use the baby Bella mushrooms, and that's what I'm using tonight, is the baby Bella mushrooms. And I just slice those all up. And I'm going to use a little bit of my beef broth just to give a little bit more additional fluid in that pan to cook those mushrooms down a little bit. Give this a stir. Get that good, all those onions and spices and everything kind of incorporated through those mushrooms. Look at how lovely this is, you guys. Absolutely wonderful. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and place my lid on this pot, and I'm going to steam and cook and boil these mushrooms for approximately 10, maybe 15 minutes, just until they're cooked and they've reduced in size quite a bit. So I'm going to grab my lid and I'm going to let that kind of simmer and cook for a little while, and then I will be back. Alright guys, so I am back. I've allowed my mushrooms to cook and kind of shrink and reduce a little bit. Now with the massive amount of mushrooms that I had, it actually took about a half hour for this to happen. So if you're doing just a single or maybe a double recipe and you're actually just using, you know, the 1 cup of mushrooms per recipe, it might not take you as long as what it took me tonight. But these have reduced wonderfully, and I will show you what that looks like here. Get that lid off. I guess I'll just temporarily set it here. But you can see, hopefully you can see through all the steam. You can see, you know, I have gone from probably a half full pan. I've gone down to about a quarter of a pan, just allowing these mushrooms to just reduce and cook, okay? And this is exactly what you want to see. All right, so I'm going to aim it down here onto my work surface. And now, like I said, I tripled my recipe, all right? And so I am working with 7 pounds of beef tonight. And I'm kind of estimating about 1 pound per jar. And so with that previously seared beef that I have setting aside, I'm just going to go ahead and equally distribute this through my 7-quart canning jars. And what I try to achieve is I try to achieve approximately a pound of beef per quart jar, so approximately half full. Now remember that this beef is just quickly seared. It is not completely cooked. And so this is going to render some juice of its own inside of the canning jar. But I'll get into that when we're in the final steps of filling the jar. So for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start filling my jars with the beef. Just pretty much I'm equally distributing it is what I'm doing. And remember that single recipe, you would have only 3-quart jars for that 2 pounds of beef. So your beef amount might be a little bit less than what mine is, you know, considering I have 7 pounds of beef that I'm working with here. All right. So we will get this off to the side. And then what I like to do is I do like to, now, like I said, this beef is not fully cooked. It's just partially cooked. And so I just take a handle end, and you know, I've got one of these hamburger masher cookers where you brown your ground beef with, and it's got this nice rounded end. And what I like to do is I kind of like to get in there and I kind of like to press this meat down a little bit, all right? Just to kind of pack it in there tight. And now remember that your meat will pretty much create enough juice to cover itself, all right? But I like to press that down in there. And you can see that, oops, sorry. Yes, sometimes my camera just isn't pointed in the right direction. You can see how it just kind of packs it down in there tightly. So I'll do this one right here. You can see that it looks really full right now, but I'm just going to kind of pack that meat down in there and get it condensed a little bit more in the bottom of the jar, filling in kind of those spaces and whatever in between each little piece of meat. And you can see how that just reduced it. You know, we were kind of fluffy and filled up to here, and now I've kind of packed it down into the bottom of the jar. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to do that to all of my jars. Get that beef packed down in. All right, those are looking fantastic. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our slotted spoon and spoon in our mushroom and onion and seasoned mixture into each jar. And I'm going to equally distribute this also, just to make sure that I have enough for each jar. And then once each jar has the mushroom and onion mixture, then just like with the beef, I just go back and I add the remaining amount little by little to each jar that I feel like could use just a little bit more, just to use up my ingredients. And you want to get this to about 1 inch headspace, all right? It's probably an important thing for me to mention right now. And also, since we are working with a hot food item, I have started to preheat my canner. If you have a hot food item and hot jar, it needs to go into a hot canner. All right, we've got all of our solids into our canning jars. I kind of give them a little shake and a little tap just to get them kind of settled down in there. Alrighty, and then we are going to take that wonderful cooking juice that we have in our pan, and we're going to kind of equally distribute that throughout our canning jar. Now I like to fill my juice just a little less than what my actual ingredients are, because with that partially cooked beef down in the bottom of the jar, it is going to render a little bit of its own juice and add juice to your jar of stroganoff. So you just want to make sure that you're not overfilling these and you're allowing enough room for that beef to render a little bit more of its own juice. And I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute after I get these filled. This wonderfully seasoned broth is amazing. Now, if you do not happen to have enough cooking fluid to finish filling your jars, you can just top off with just a little plain beef broth. I'm just going back through and putting a little bit more in each one of my jars that need it. All right, you guys, that looks absolutely amazing. I'm gonna get this pan off of the stove. get this burner turned back on and move my canner over. All right, so I will show you at this point in time what this jar pack looks like, okay? We've got our wonderful partially cooked beef on the bottom. We have our mushrooms and our onions on top, and then we have filled with juice. Now, I have left a good 1.5 inches because remember when I said that this beef is not fully cooked and it will render a little bit more juice. That headspace of liquid will rise because this meat will render a little bit more juice. Now I'm going to take, let's see here. I guess I'm going to take this little guy. I am going to debubble this just a little bit because sometimes those mushrooms and onions can trap a little bit of air in there. And, you know, most of the time you won't see me debubbling anything because most of the time I just don't feel like it needs it. But this is one of those things that I do feel like you should probably debubble. And once you get that all settled down in there by debubbling, then if you feel like you need a little bit more broth, you can just take your plain beef broth and just complete filling the jar, top it off with a little bit of broth. Okay, and I feel like a couple of those, the level did go down just a little bit. And so I'm going to go ahead and add just a touch more beef broth to each jar, but not much. You want to be really careful with that headspace because that beef is going to render a little bit of its own juice. So about 1.5 inches is where I feel safe with the completion of this. All right. That looks fantastic. I will lift this up so that you can see again. We are at 1.5 inch headspace, all right? 1 inch is way up here. Down here is about 1.5 inches. Alrighty, so just like any other canning application, you'll want to wipe those rims and place your flat end ring. Now, I am going to pressure can these. These are quarts. I will pressure can these for 90 minutes. If you are doing pints, you would pressure can for 75 minutes. If you would prefer to hot water bath this item, either size jar, pint or quart, would be hot water bath for 3 hours. We'll just get those hot jars into our hot canner. And I use just a clean laundered dishcloth, just wet with water. I don't use vinegar to wipe my rims at all. I personally feel that it kind of compromises that sealing compound. I've tried a vinegar soaked cloth and I've just had problems with failure when I use the vinegar soaked washcloth. So I just use plain water, just a damp, clean washcloth, and I don't have any problems. Alright guys, so here is our last quart of beef stroganoff going into the canner. You know what? I got the wrong size lid, guys. Huh, I counted wrong. All right, I've got to get one more flat and ring, and I will be right back. Okay, there we go. See a little onion that kind of snuck up on the side of that jar. Gonna push him down in, and here is our last lid and ring. Into that hot canner it goes, and we'll get our lid and get that placed. All right. So there we are. I'm going to vent for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to place my weight appropriate to my altitude. And I am going to then, when it gets up to pressure, I'm going to time these quarts of beef stroganoff for 90 minutes. Now, just to recap, if you are pressure canning pints, it would be 75 minutes. And if you prefer to hot water bath, either size jar, pint or quart, would be 3 hours hot water bath. So I'm going to get through this canning process, and then I will show you the amazing results at the end. I'll see you in a little while. All right, so I have gotten through my 90-minute pressure canning session for these quarts of beef stroganoff, and I've allowed my canner to cool naturally. I was able to then remove the weight after it, came down from pressure, and I cracked the lid open just a couple of different times just to slow down the cool down process. And now I feel it is safe to remove the lid and safe to remove these beautiful jars of stroganoff. Here we go, guys. Look at how gorgeous that is. Oh. And honestly, this is one of those times that I wish there was smell-o-vision. Because you guys, this is so yummy. Just going to get the rest of these jars out and clean off. I thought I heard something crack in there, and I had a jar with thermal shock, and I'm going to show it to you. What do I always say? I always say the good, the bad, and the ugly. And check this out, guys. Back in the video, I kind of reached back in the canner and kind of looked at a jar. Oh, there goes one of those superb lids. But anyway, I got to show this to you because I knew something had happened. Check that out. Look at that. Total thermal shock. Completely lost that jar of food. All that wonderful beef, all those mushrooms. Yep, there she goes. See the break there? Yeah. I heard it, and I kind of, checked back in the canner, and I didn't see anything with my eyes, but I knew something had happened because I kind of heard the snap. You learn these sights and smells and sounds, and yeah, that's just tragic because that's like a pound of beef that now, there's no way of salvaging it because who knows if there's glass shards or whatever else in it. Love those superb lids. But anyway, so I'm going to let the other 6 jars cool and seal overnight, And then tomorrow I will come back and I will show you how to finish this off in an amazing, like 10-minute meal. All right? So we will see you in the morning. Alrighty, good morning, everybody. So overnight, my wonderful beef stroganoff cooled off and sealed. And so today I'm going to pop open a couple of jars of that and show you how I finish it. And it's super simple, honestly. You just dump the contents of your jar into a pan and add approximately a cup of sour cream. That's, of course, dependent on your taste. But I do about a cup of sour cream per quart jar of this stroganoff. And then I just heat it in a pan until it's slightly thickened, and then I serve it with egg noodles. So I've got my pan of water boiling for my egg noodles. And here, I suppose I should probably show you, now that it's all nice and cool, what this beautiful beef stroganoff looks like. Just gorgeous results. All right, so I'm going to tip you down here and pop open a couple of jars. Those beautiful, superb lids. Oh, I just love these things, guys. Better find a ledge that works. All right, and into a pan it goes. And you can see how by searing my meat, you can see that the chunks of meat do kind of remain intact, which is fantastic. You can use any cut of beef, honestly, that you want to. I wouldn't suggest using ground beef, but, you know, a chuck roast or a brisket or just whatever you have on hand works really well for this. Now you can see that there is quite a bit of juice, so we are going to thicken this just a little bit. You know what? I forgot a spoon for my sour cream. Oh, I'll just use one of the ones in my gadget holder there. And like I said, I use approximately 1 cup of sour cream per quart jar. So I'm just going to estimate. Sour cream is honestly my favorite part of stroganoff. So I never feel like I can overdo it. Might even put just a little bit more in than that. And we'll just get that heating over medium heat and stir it regularly until it gets nice and thick to the consistency that you would like to see it. And in the meantime, I'm going to get my egg noodles cooked. And once everything is completed, I will come back and plate some of this up for you so that you can see the final results. So we'll be back in just a little bit. All right, so I have kind of reduced and thickened my wonderful beef stroganoff sauce and meat and all that good stuff you got out of your jar. Now, if you have a lot more beef broth in yours, you can always add a little bit of cornstarch slurry to thicken your stroganoff up also. But it thickens up really well on its own, to be honest, when you cook it. And I have my cooked egg noodles. And I'm just going to add my stroganoff to the egg noodles without splattering myself too bad here, I hope. All that wonderful goodness. And give it a little mix to incorporate through your noodles. And I'm making this for for a party that we're going to today. And so I'm actually just going to stick this in my crock pot, and that's why I made such a large amount. Got a potluck to go to today. so they all get to enjoy my homemade beef stroganoff. All right. Oh, how absolutely beautiful. So I'll just dish up just a little bit here so you can see. Tip down my camera. You guys, this is just wonderful stuff. There's one of those pieces of beef, and you can see that it stays right on your fork. Some of the pieces did get stirred apart, but they're still really intact. Just marvelous. This is just really comfort food, to be honest with you. Nothing better than beef stroganoff, particularly on a cold winter day. I mean, this is definitely comfort food. So I'll give it a little taste test here for you. This is my favorite part. Oh, I got so excited I dropped a noodle on the floor. Oh, it's so yummy. Beefy, and that touch of sour cream. I gotta make sure, I gotta take a second bite here. Absolutely delicious and delightful. I hope that you found this tutorial informational. I hope that you give this recipe of Amber's a try in your own home and set some aside in your pantry for the future. As always, thank you so much for spending your time with me again today. God bless you all, and happy canning, everybody.